So we could have just recorded our conversation that we've just had, Clara. I
Yes,
just think
yes.
it's like, um, can we do a rewind and like
Yeah.
start again?
No, yeah. If we ever do this in the future, you need to hit rewind from the very beginning.
I know. We came on, it's like, oh my God, so much useful, interesting information has just come out. And then we're like, we're going to talk about again today.
Yes. I'll be like, oh, I can't remember.
So thank you ever so much for joining me on the Good Girl Deprogramming podcast. So for the listeners, if I sound weird, I've got a cold. It's been going on for weeks, so I might just sound like this from now on. So we'll have to keep an eye out.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm going to ask the first question. We tried to do this as well last week, and then the internet
Yes,
went down. So
it did.
this, I've never had to make so much effort to get one podcast out.
I know, me neither. It's the third time lucky because we had to postpone because we had illness in our house as well.
I know, it's crackers. So, did you ever think you were a good girl, or did you ever feel like you had to conform to the good girl stereotypes growing up?
I very much felt like good girl was confirmation all in one
Mm.
place, very stereotypically, eldest daughter, first grandchild in one side of the family, and very much was about that confirmation. And then as I got a little bit older, probably teenager, so it hasn't been a late revelation for me, maybe
Mm.
compared to some other people. Um, I sort of flipped it and thought actually it's about honesty. And it is amazing being a woman and being honest, how you don't fit into the good girl. You're seen as argumentative, or you're seen as oversensitive, or you're seen as an overthinker, or you're seen as, just caring too much. But for me, I think it's interesting for me because I've never, from the minute I think my hormones kicked in, I've never seen myself as a good girl.
Mm.
And I bizarrely have some pride around that. But yeah, very, very much that's even now though as an adult, I equate goodness with compliance, which is not for me at all.
No, that obedience.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely. Definitely. And I think it's hard because society rewards obedience in women.
Hmm.
It rewards being quiet, it rewards being little, it rewards the status quo. From the language that it's the whole bossy versus assertive of element as well. Um, but what I found really interesting, especially as I got older, is you attract like for like. So the people that I have around me question, and they're curious, and they're interested in what's going on in the world, and they won't necessarily um, just take it as a given. They'll
Mm.
try and sort of pick things apart, and that's what really fuels me, I suppose. Um, and being the mother of two girls, again, there is that element of don't be quiet, you know, push back, take into consideration. And I think I sometimes find myself when I became a mom, slipping into that idea of goodness because I wanted safety for me and my family, and don't rock the boat. But generally, that pattern almost is a stress response. So when I find myself being compliant, normally it's an indication I'm overwhelmed
Yeah.
and something to give, rather than the other way when people may assume that the outspoken brash person is the one that is struggling. That's actually me when I'm very, very confident.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we don't talk about that fawn response, do we,
Yeah.
very often in, everyone knows about the fight, flight,
Yeah.
freeze. With
Hmm.
fawn, it's like kind of attend and befriend,
Yes.
all of that stuff. It is a very, it's not necessarily uniquely feminine
No.
approach because, everybody uses it to a certain extent
Hmm.
when confronted with sort of fear
Yeah.
or yeah, or yeah, it's like a autonomic nervous system response,
Yes.
you can
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating one because that's where all the people pleasing
Mm.
comes in and the perfectionism
Hmm.
and it's just exhausting.
Yeah. I think what I find most interesting for me is since going self-employed, so I went out on my own 10 years this year, and have being able to walk away as we were talking earlier, from that capitalist approach, not having to people please, not
Hmm.
having to toe the line. I think about, I loved the jobs that I had before, so I walked away from a secure corporate career because this is what I wanted to do next, and had the opportunity to have the financial stability through redundancy to do that.
Mm.
So unlike some other people that maybe have moved into self-employment because of awful environments, I didn't really have awful environments, but the environment didn't suit me.
Hmm.
And when I look back on a lot of the stress and frustration that used to happen, it was because there was still that expectation of, we want you to be innovative, we want you to push back until we don't, and then that's not,
Yes.
and then yeah, it's a little bit too far, or actually that that's not within your role, or you're not responsible for that. And it's been so freeing, sort of moving into self-employment, especially with what I do. I can be unapologetically me. I can work the hours that I work without feeling like I have to excuse myself. I can say yes to the people I want to work with and no to the people I want to work with. And in a way, having a nice response to that, which is against what you're made to believe when you enter self-employment. You're supposed to be available all your time. You have to say yes to everything. And actually, that's been really nice for me to sort of reinforce that element of, it's okay to not be like everybody else. Like we said before, I used to think, in all the roles that I had, and I was still very strategic with where I worked. The last place I worked in corporate was higher education, so it was the third sector, so it was
Hmm.
far less, capitalistic than an awful lot of industries maybe. But there was still that element of a hierarchy. There was still that element of, even though we had really, really strong female leadership right across the department that I was in, there was just still this element of, like I said to you, sort of, what did I say? Oh, the emperor's new clothes. Somebody would
Hmm.
say something or do something, and I'd sort of look around and think, can anyone else see that this is, ridiculous? Or I'd say something, and then one of the male leaders would pick up that as their own. And thankfully we had sort of a group of middle managers where we'd amplify each other and draw attention to the fact it was someone else that had said it. But that constant battle, I think, when you're
Mm.
not naturally compliant, is just as exhausting as feeling like you have to behave in that way. I think it's any
Yeah.
type of environment where you're having to work against type.
Yeah.
It is just exhausting.
It's like it's masking, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. And
That professionalism.
yeah, yeah, through a journey with my kids, I've come to the realization I probably am neurodivergent. Um, self-identified through two identified children medically, where I'm almost
Yeah.
like,
So where did they get this from?
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
this is interesting. And I've got a close family member also that's neurodivergent, so there's no way it skipped a generation. But
No.
again, looking back on those challenges that I had about going against type, about communication, about empathy, all those types of things, I can see now, because I was trying to move in a neurotypical world whilst being, I'd say, fairly unmasked,
Hmm.
which was quite
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah,
Yes. It's like,
yeah,
what do I do with this one?
exactly. I always remember though, like from the point that sorry, my daughter's just walked in.
Okay.
Say it again. I've got no idea. I'm just in the middle of recording a podcast. No, 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 it's okay. I'll have a look afterwards. So then, yeah, she's looking for the sewing kit. Um, yeah, I don't know where it is actually.
I don't know where mine
Um,
is. It's
no,
in the box somewhere, so I
yeah,
can't even
yeah,
help.
no. So we'll find it at some point. It's actually in my grandma's sewing box, which is a really
Oh,
old box. So it's very, very pretty, and I put it somewhere really safe, and I can't find it.
I hate it
So
when that
yeah,
happens.
so thinking about that element of unmasking, moving in a world that really, that was it. So I was saying how, like, early days, first entering my career in professional in inverted commas, I always remember I'd be driving into work or getting the train into work and be going, today I'm going to be the grown up. Today I'm going to be the adult. I'm going to be calm. I'm going to be an adult. And it's only now you look back and just think, oh, it's because you're having to sort of fight against, don't challenge, just do this in a particular way. I always find it quite interesting. And I say this a lot to my clients as well. And it happens awful in a lot of environments that are, quite capitalist, quite patriarchal. They recruit you for your skills, but then don't want you to use them.
Yes, it's like
And it's
just collecting me, are we?
yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. So it's like,
Mm.
we want you to do that, but not in this context. Um, so yeah, so there's been sort of one of my greatest strengths has been my honesty, but also it's caused friction. And I think as a
Mm.
woman, you're not allowed to cause friction.
No, no, no. It's like what is the purpose of a woman? It's like,
Yes.
don't ask Twitter that question.
Yeah. No. I'm not even on Twitter now. It's
No.
I haven't worked out how to take it off my like the little link bit off my websites and socials. But if you click on it, it's like this user does not exist. I'm like, yeah, and
Yeah.
she will not be making her way back.
Oh,
But but it, but yeah, it's there's so much out there, um, especially a massive peak now, where it's just
mm.
about keeping people in their place,
Yeah.
and it's a power dynamic,
Yeah.
around being accessible and being compliant and being this whole idea of like women are nurturing, but
Mhm.
the nurturing has to be all about giving.
Yes.
It's not about growing.
Selflessly,
Selfless type of giving.
self-martyring almost.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, I think it's been an interesting process, but I really do think, bizarrely, the sort of the catalyst for really deprogramming all of that is going self-employed, which I
Yeah.
didn't expect. I did not expect.
Hmm.
Um, but being in control of my diary, being in control of my message, being in control of my pricing, and being in control of my availability and all those types of things actually has had an interesting knock-on effect across the rest of my life as well.
It's fascinating. So I don't know whether so I went self-employed in 2016, so I might be in a year behind you.
Yes, I was 2015. Yeah.
And I did what you normally do is you like almost try and recreate the corporate environment in your own business, which is bonkers. And then
Yeah.
you go to like, you know, I'm not going to name the bank, Entrepreneur Accelerator, and it's the same stuff. It's
Mm,
that very masculine
mm,
process, profit.
mm.
That's like, nothing about the people, not,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, and I found myself almost drowning in the shoulds and shouldn'ts
Mm,
of business and what
mm.
we should be doing as
Yes.
self-employed people. Actually, I was told that I was too nice to be in business, so I should go and get myself a nice little job,
Wow.
my man, which was interesting. And you know what's really interesting? He probably doesn't even remember saying that.
No, be a
Yeah,
throwaway comment.
yeah.
So,
So it's like,
mm,
blah, blah.
it's interesting for me because actually my business was seeded out of social enterprise.
Hmm.
So whilst I was still at the university, I had a small pot of money. And actually my original business was not coaching was not going to be the income generator. It was going to be
Hmm.
recruitment because that was sort of again, a capitalist approach of well, I need to sell what people will pay for.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I went out on my own, I came across the School for Social Entrepreneurs, um, and that was a year-long program. And I knew that I always wanted to take a social entrepreneurship approach to my business, and it was so interesting being in a room full of people that thought that same way.
Hmm.
And again, almost probably the opposite for you, in that we were told you have to pay yourself first because you can't do good without any money. And that
Mm.
again is a really interesting perspective because there's so much space around the third sector, not for profit, that you're doing it for the goodness of the
Yeah,
world.
it's
And
a
actually,
vocation.
exactly, and you don't deserve to be paid. So there was lots of us in that room, who had a really strong lived experience behind the work that they were doing, and then we were given, really good role models about people that had done that. And I was in a really interesting position because I'm a trained salesperson. I spent 5 years, after my degree, I purposely went into recruitment, and probably one of the few people in the world that was
Didn't
like, I want
accidentally go in.
exactly, yeah, like it was my intention. because I was just so fascinated with the idea, the time that people spend in work and the impact that they have, and why do people choose who they choose, and why do they have the businesses that they have? Probably all of that should have been a very early clue to me around how my brain worked.
It's like, why? Why is
Why?
the big
Why?
question, isn't it? Why are
Why?
you doing it
Why?
like this?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And again, I really like the ethics of the organisation that I worked with, even though I got headhunted quite a lot. I never, both by clients and other recruitment consultancies, I wasn't
Mm.
interested. And then when I decided I needed something more family friendly, I knew I wanted to go into the not-for-profit, and luckily a job came up in the university sector. So I've always been really strategic, I suppose, around finding places that fit how I view the world. So then finding the social enterprise space, and I think this is where a lot of my frustration in the workplace comes from, because I'm like, we don't have to spend our whole lives being profit led. We're not
Mm.
saying don't pay people good money. We're just saying profit doesn't have to be the end goal of any type of organization. And sort of how I've structured my business is very much like that. It's a sliding scale. When I'm working with career or return to work coaching, if I'm working with an organization and they're a blue chip, they pay the most,
Hmm.
and then it slides down. And then there's a whole suite of support that I put in around my blog and around my Ask Me Anything, where people never have to pay me a penny. And I think again, it's like that good girl deprogramming of it's okay to say, yeah, you are paying more because you can afford it, and they're paying less because that's their individual budget, and I'm not apologizing for that. I think again, it's been quite enlightening because it just makes sense to me. It
Yes.
just makes sense.
Yeah. It's so funny. That's pretty much how we do it. But there's
Mm.
there's also an element of fun-based pricing.
Yes. Oh
So
yeah.
if it's going to be fun, it's not going to be
Yeah.
as expensive.
Yeah. And this is the thing, like I always say to people, as a rule, as my rule, I work Monday to Thursday, sort of 9:30ish till 2:30ish. But if something comes up outside of that that I want to do, I will bend my own rules, and that is fine. It's absolutely fine. But that doesn't then mean that every single person that asks me to work on a Friday, or every single person that wants me to do something at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, is going to get a yes,
Hmm.
because I have to feel, and again, it might be an organization that I love and I want to give some value that way, or they're paying really well, let's be honest. I'm like, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
why not? That's a week's worth of money in 2 hours type of thing.
Yeah.
And likewise, if there's an organization that comes to me and they can't afford my pricing, I say, well, what is your budget, and let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
And there is an element of, Clara from the past would have felt like it would have been unfair to do that, when actually I'm like, no, it's about equity.
Hmm.
It's not about parity. Mr. Joe Bloggs that runs a multi-million company cannot expect to be treated the same way as, a mum that's coming back to work after 2 years type of thing.
Absolutely
Um,
not.
and it's really nice, I suppose, and it's a thing I advocate really strongly when I'm working with individuals, either individually or within their business, or self-employed people. It's like, it's okay to run your life the way that you want to run your life. Because there's, and I see it with my kids going through school. It's like it's a factory setting. You're
Hmm.
expected to do things in a certain way, at a certain time scale. And actually, as we said, before we started recording, I do a lot of work with people where we look in the future and, think about the latter parts of their life, and work is like a tiny, tiny part of it. Tiny part of it.
Enables, you said, I think it
Yes, yeah.
enables your lifestyle.
Yeah, it enables your lifestyle. And for some people, their work is a massive part of their identity, and they should be unapologetic about that, as much as
Mm.
people where work enables their life to be unapologetic about that. But there's just so much out there. And I think again, when we come back to this whole idea of, being programmed as good, I work a lot with parents. It's predominantly parents. This whole idea about, what looks like a good mom and what looks like a good dad,
Mm.
and a good dad is a provider and a good mom is a sacrificer. And actually, the world doesn't work like that.
No.
And we have to be very realistic. We're living in a capitalist society that has absolutely no signs of shifting at any
No.
point in the future. So we have to be realistic about, there's a tiny percentage of people that don't need to work for money. I don't actually spend any time with those people. They come from generations of wealth that is beyond my imagination. So you might as well enjoy what you do. Might as
Yes.
well enjoy what you do. You might as well get paid a way that that enables you to live the life you want to live, and to be unapologetic about that.
No, I love it. So we talked about briefly at the beginning, before we started recording, of
Yes,
course,
yes.
about sort of having a feminist business, because you said
Mm.
can you talk to us about that a bit?
Yes, so I've always been unapologetically feminist. Like I don't understand anyone that isn't. But a couple of years ago, I sort of came to the realization that I'm anti-capitalist as a career coach as well. And obviously the feminism is obvious. It's about, acknowledging the systems that people work under. It's acknowledging um the prejudice that certain groups are under and the reality of that. There's the element around choice. If somebody doesn't want to work, that's as much as a choice as someone that does.
Mm.
But the anti-capitalist thing, I think, was I I always knew I was, but
The
I didn't have a
terminology.
terminology for it.
Yeah.
So again, even though I am a career coach, return to work coach, whatever phraseology you want to look at it, sometimes I never speak to anybody about their work.
Mm.
Somebody can come to me for career coaching, but work is actually the last thing we talk about. We talk about their values, we talk about their purpose, we talk about their needs, we talk about self-care and radical self-care. We talk about relationships, we talk about, breaking down systems, we talk about what they can control and what they can't control. And through that, the conversation around work may come up.
Mm.
Maybe a bit of transactional analysis around the dynamics they're having with a manager who happens to be male, who happens to have a wife in inverted commas at home, so they don't understand their needs for work-life balance. But there is this whole element of, when I first, so I've coached all through my career, but really didn't start properly coaching until I started my qualification. So my first qualification completed in 2017 and my second 2024.
Mm.
Got a psychology degree. I'm a mental health first aider, a project, when I worked at the university, I took everything I possibly could
It's
from
like,
that as
what can
well.
I have,
What
please?
else can I have? Prince 2, sure, yeah, I'll have this. Disqualified, those types of things. So
Mm.
when I first entered the coaching space proper, I'd say it was all about, audacious, hairy goals, big,
Mhm.
audacious, hairy goals. And you need to grow and you need to stretch yourself. And actually, for me, if somebody's aim in life is simplicity and streamlining,
Mhm.
that is an important goal. So
Yeah.
again, there isn't this whole idea of, by the end, you'll never say, you'll never see in my promotion, by the end of this time, this client had got a £20,000 pay rise. They might have done, but that actually isn't the outcome with that. Is, it's always about a career to enjoy, not endure, because we spend so much time working, thinking about work, planning our life around work. It needs to be something that's, enjoyable. You need to feel like that you're aligned with your values. You need to feel like you are making a difference. You need to be unapologetic if you're not following a path that other
Mm.
people have decided is successful. And I've known all that, but I actually hadn't realized it was a thing, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um,
Because it's
and
subversive. It's not
it
sort of
is
the normal.
exactly, and actually when it's always an interesting process when I'm pitching to corporates on especially the return to work stuff, usually it's mums coming back. There's a few dads sort of sprinkled in there, but again, the dads being able to take any time out isn't
Yeah.
great
No.
financially. And one of the things I always say to organizations that if I'm working with a client and they decide they don't want to be with you anymore, I will help them leave.
Oh, yeah.
And again, um, I've possibly lost work because of that, but
Mm.
I have to be honest and say it's always about if we use like third sector, it's the beneficiary. So the person I'm
Mhm.
coaching is my client. It just happens that their employer pays my wages. And
Mhm.
actually, sometimes what can happen is the parents can return, feel really overwhelmed, really overloaded. They've lost their sense of identity, and they think that the way to resolve that is to leave their job. But actually, through the coaching process, we realize it's better balance at home, it's better self-care, it's conversations with the management. It's not judging themselves too harshly because often they'll
Mm.
judge themselves at a level that they never did beforehand when actually they have
Mhm.
a hard stop, they have less time, they're sleep deprived, those types of things. But I say to the corporate, respectfully, like I'd rather lose I'd rather lose this contract
Mm.
and tell you that I won't keep somebody here if they don't want to, than not deal with that. And
Yeah,
again,
1000%.
and again, I know full well that that approach isn't unusual.
Mm.
The approach is telling the corporate organisation. That's the stuff that's different. And
Yeah.
that's where I come back to this whole idea of honesty. Like I'm not going to pretend I'm something I'm not to get the work. And this, this comes back to much to my old manager's frustration. When I used to work in commercial recruitment, it was never bums in seats, and I did well. Like, my approach did well. But if somebody wasn't right for a job, even if that candidate was like, I really want to work for that organisation, I'd be like, it's not for you. It's not for
Mm.
you. And again, I think it's quite, for me it's just, it makes sense. I'm not going to not work like that. But especially moving around in the corporate life, and then obviously in the third sector, and then what I do now, I realize that actually it's not that I think unusually, it's just a lot of people aren't happy to be that open
Hmm.
about it,
Yeah.
because again they're scared of
Everybody's
rejection.
pretending.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
like, why is everybody pretending? Why are people not saying what they mean? It's
yeah,
really weird.
it is. It's very, very strange. And I think, and again, I think a lot of it comes down to how women are treated. There's a
Mm.
fear to rejection. There's a fear, to being to be sort of cast away, to
Yeah.
lose that support
Yeah.
network. But when you understand the neuroscience behind that, and you tell people fear of rejection doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's we're primed that way.
Yes, it's like because the ones that didn't give a shit, they all died out really young and they did not
Exactly.
procreate. It's like the anxious ones that wanted to be friends with everybody. Those were
Yeah,
the women that survived because
exactly.
those were the skills that were needed to survive.
Exactly.
So,
So I think that there's such a piece around education and awareness, and again even honesty.
mm,
I think we started talking on LinkedIn because I have no filter. So I think I hopped on your LinkedIn talking about menstrual cycles.
well,
I think,
probably. I
yeah, I
talk
think,
about it all the
yeah,
time.
but I
Very
think that
boring.
that's how we met,
Yeah.
because I was like, yeah, so I've had what now is known as PMDD. It
Mhm.
was called extreme PMS when I was like 15, 16. So that's
Mm.
something I've battled with my whole life. Obviously now I'm at an age where I'm like the other end of the hormone spectrum. So, but one of the things that I've I started to do early doors in my business was to map my menstrual cycle against my diary, because actually the honesty that I talk about isn't just about other people, it's with myself. So I
Mhm.
know the week before my period's due, I'm an anxious mess. I can't write. I feel really overwhelmed. So I try and track my work to identify that. Like even things like this, quite coincidentally, every time we booked in these sessions, like the first time I booked it in, I
Mhm.
made sure I booked it in a good week. And then,
Yay.
and then last week, and then my daughter got ill. And then last
Mhm.
week again, sort of that this week, last week's a good week. And again, there's this element of there's so much shame and embarrassment around that, when actually I talk about it probably more one to one. I don't, I don't necessarily write about it a lot because I don't want to be seen as a woman's health hormone expert, because
Mm.
I'm not. I'm not. All I do is I do this. This is how I live my life. But being able to have that honesty with myself that this week, I'm not going to be great. I try and pre-schedule a lot of my social media in that
Mhm.
week so that I'm not particularly reactive. If I see something and I know
Stay
I'm
off
gonna,
LinkedIn.
yeah, or sort of, yeah, like, back off. But then in a good week, so I know I can handle. I've got a little bit more energy in my good week. I can manage more
Mm.
clients. I can maybe write 2 or 3 blogs that week. And again, there is that element of like, when we think about this whole, this good, like, we're not supposed to talk about that. We're
No.
supposed to think that we're just this flat, consistent person all the way through. And sometimes this comes up with my clients as well, and I'll,
Mm.
with their permission, say, can I share something? And I'll share about my personal situation. And all of a sudden, again, it's a permission piece that, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, that's not just me. You
It's
know,
like that totally makes sense.
it
Why
totally
aren't we
makes
living
sense.
cyclically?
Exactly. My life is so much better that way. My business is so much better. My health is so much better, and it just makes life generally better. We don't have to push ourselves to a point of burnout. And I think what's so interesting is that because it's something that happens in inverted commas naturally, there's this expectation that we just need to suck it up.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky in that. I've found ways to manage it. I found ways, there's a supplement regime that really helps. But I've got other, the physical side of things is fairly manageable, but the
Mm.
emotional side, the anxiety side, but it's quite a short window compared to what it used to be. Before I'd have one good week a month. That would be it. And
Mm.
that's with raising kids, working, driving, all these types of things. And weirdly, I always thought becoming self-employed with the stress of, financial instability and all that type of stuff, that I'd feel worse, but I feel better.
Because you're in control.
Yeah, and it
You
is.
can
It's
do,
all
yeah.
about control.
Yeah. I used to really love the film Pretty Woman. Like I literally can't, I can't even face it now.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like there's a part of the script. She goes, I choose who, I choose when, I choose how much. Like
Yeah,
that's literally like
it is. I
that's
say
not,
I
yeah.
say that all the time with clients when I say, what is work-life balance? I say for me, it's what I do, where I do it, who I do it with.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
yeah, but what's so interesting is and I've had conversations with family and this whole idea, well, why should you be able to work like that? Why that the whole should word, well,
Hmm.
that's selfish.
Ah.
And I'm like, I was having a conversation about it recently with someone, and she's looking to change her career and wants to maintain the part-time work.
Hmm.
And I was saying the thing is, we have been raised by a generation where you stop work at some point in your life. So
Yeah.
this whole idea that you work and then you stop and then you live. Now, we are in a generation for a whole host of different reasons, which probably is another podcast, that we're never
Yes.
going to stop work as long as we're healthy, which
Yeah.
we then have to put an effort into doing as much as we can
Maintaining. Yeah.
within our control. I'm not saying that everyone is able to do that, but
No.
what is within our control. So we're never going to stop. So there's two things we need to do. We need to unapologetically work the hours we need to do to have the life that we want to have. And second of all, we need to get better educated with finance,
Mm.
because we have relied too long on, and again, it's about this permission and control. We've relied too long on other people telling us how much we're worth when we're employed around pay scales and things, and then waiting for this magical thing at whatever age it's going to be, in our 60s or older, where all of a sudden, and then the people that push back on that go, actually, I want to enjoy what I do.
Hmm.
And I want that to be part of a wider life. And I want to feel that I have energy to do things when I'm not working. Why is that seen as something that's abnormal? And it all comes back to capitalism.
Yeah. 1000%.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm very sad to announce that we need to like just ask the last question here. I was like, oh, I'm
Yes.
really enjoying this.
Oh,
So,
me too.
oh, definitely keep talking.
Yes.
So I don't, again, capitalism. I don't like telling
Yes.
people, I do like telling people what to do. I'm the eldest grandchild on both sides. There's loads of
Yes.
us.
Yeah.
Of course, like the natural bossiness, which
Yeah.
is a word that I am reclaiming, have
Yes.
reclaimed. I'm a
Yes.
bossy. I'm bossy as fuck.
Yes.
Um, but I don't like telling people what to do with their lives.
Yeah.
So, apart from my family, bless
That
them,
that's a given.
that's completely different.
Yeah.
So, what question
Mm.
can our listeners slash viewers ponder
Mm.
from your
S-
perspective?
So I'm going to ask them to consider what their future self would thank them for. I love that one anyway as a coaching process, but I think especially in a world that feels so uncertain,
Mm.
feels so out of control, there can be so much. There's a safety in the status quo, but actually think a little bit ahead. What can you do today that your future self is going to thank you for? And it doesn't have to be massive. It could be
Mm.
you're going to take an early night. It could be you're going to, send that CV off for something that you've been holding back on. But just ask yourself that, because I think whenever we look back on our decisions, we always see it was the right process. It has to be.
Mhm.
So, yeah, what can you do today that your future self would thank you for? I'll leave them with that.
I love it. Love due to the fact that I'm actually going to be ringing loads of people this today and messaging them to cancel stuff because I just need to get better. quite
Yeah,
frankly.
yeah.
So yes, so I am taking your advice. So thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've loved it.
Yes, we definitely will have to. I'm gonna like in 6 months' time. I'm gonna get you back
Yes.
in.
Yeah, definitely. I'm up for
So
that.
awesome. Well, thank you ever so much, and I'm so
That's
glad that
okay.
we did it without the
Yes.
internet falling off
Yeah.
or anybody apart from me getting sick. So
Yeah. Well,
yes.
I woke up this morning quite bunged up.
Oh no.
Um, I spent last week with an awful headache and awful dizziness, and I was convinced it's because I started taking collagen.
Ah.
Because I think I have a histamine intolerance, which is where a lot of the PMDD comes from, and definitely settled since I've started taking magnesium really regularly. So I was like, okay, obviously this is definitely a histamine intolerance. However, most of my youngest daughter's year has been ill with this horrible headache and dizziness. So I don't now know if I've had that
Could be a
or
bit
if
of both.
bit of both. So I'm like, I'm going to wait until I feel fine, then I'm going to try the collagen again because I'm
Fun,
like,
isn't it?
yeah, I'm like, I just feel like I'm a constant science
I
experiment.
know. Well, if you can't experiment on yourself,
Yeah.
what's the point, quite
What have I
frankly?
eaten? Have I done this? Have I done
Yes.
that? Have I done the other? But
Yes.
yeah, it's been lovely. And yeah,
Yeah.
we'll keep in touch. And I'm going to add, I haven't done it yet, but I do a monthly book review. Um, and then it goes, so I do it in my group, although the take up isn't great. I think they just wait to see what I think about the book. And then I do a monthly review. So I'm going to stick your book on
Oh,
for
thank you.
this year as well, because I think there's a lot of people are going to find that interesting.
Yes, it's like the first, yeah, the truth will set you free, but first it will really piss you off.
Yes, yeah. To be fair, that is pretty much the theme of most of the books that I read in my personal development. Like,
Yep.
read this, you'll shout at the sky, and then you'll go, okay, this is what we're going to do. But yeah,
Yep.
definitely that's going to be popping on there as well. Cool, it's been
Absolutely.
a pleasure,
Thank you so
and
much.
I'll see you soon. Bye bye bye.